Okay, for Module 3, we're going to start talking about solving equations. So this is NOT 0028, and we're talking about Module 3. And this is actually in your ebook in section 2.1, and we're going to be talking about equations now. Okay, and first we're going to introduce the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division properties of equality. Okay, now we're talking about equalities. First off, I want to give you the definition of an equation. Okay, up until now we've been talking about expressions, but here we're talking about equations. Okay, and that's a statement that indicates that two quantities are equal. Are equal. Okay, it means that it has an equal sign. Right? Write that a little bit better. So an equation has an equal sign, right? It has two parts. It has two sides. And the sides are separated by an equal sign. I say separated by an equal sign. Right, so for example, if I say x equals 5, we're saying that those two quantities are equal. If I say y plus 2 equals 12, or something like negative 4z equals 28. Right, these are all examples of equations. So equations have solutions, right? So we talk about the definition of the solution to an equation. And that is the value of the variable that makes the statement true. Right, or that the right side, that the left side equals the right side. So if I had, if I said x plus 3 equals 7, well, if I ask myself what number plus 3 equals 7, we know that 4, x has to be 4, right? So 4 is a solution. So that's what we mean by a solution to an equation. Now I want to draw a very important distinction, okay? So avoid mistakes like this. If I have something like this, 2x plus 1 equals 7, right? This is an equation Notice it has an equal sign, right? It has an equal sign, and it can be solved. Okay. On the other hand, 2x plus 1 plus 7 is an expression. Notice that it has no equal sign, right? And this can be simplified. So that's a little bit of the language that we talk about. We talk about solving an equation and simplifying an expression. Okay, so this is one, that's an equation, and that's an expression. Okay, so be very careful when you're given a problem. You have to know what you're given. Okay. So sometimes you might be asked to determine if a number is a solution to an equation. Right. So you might have to determine if a number is a solution to an equation. That just means when you plug that number in, do both sides equal? So for example, is 3 a solution to 4x minus 1 equals, the equation 4x minus 1 equals 7? Well, what do? We say, well, let's put in 3 into x. So let's check it. Okay, so we say 4 times 3. 4x simply means 4 times, right? 4 times 3, x. So it's 4 times 3 minus 7. And I always put a little question mark here if I haven't figured it out yet. And say, does that equal 7? Well, that's 12 minus 1. Does that equal 7? 11 does not equal 7, right? So the answer is no. In this case, 3 is not a solution to an equation. Okay, so instead of guessing whether or not something is a solution to an equation, what we want to do is solve it. And what we need to do is we need to use different properties of equality. So I'm going to talk about the addition and subtraction properties of equality. Okay, so let's first talk about the addition property of equality. Okay, so now again, we're talking about equalities, right? Equations. So we need to start thinking of this as something that's completely balanced, right? We have two sides, and it's on the left side of the equal sign and the right side of the equal sign. We only have sides when we're talking about equations, right? When there's an equal sign. This property says that if I have two quantities, let's say two variables, a and b, and I know that they're equal, then if I add another quantity to each side, so that should be b, if I add the same quantity to each side, then they're still equal. Right, so think of this, the equal sign, think of it as the center of a scale, right, the fulcrum. And I have some block A here, and it's perfectly balanced with this block B, right? If that's the case, so this is balanced, right? If that's the case, then I add the same block to both sides, right? If I have A, and then I put another block C there, and I had B and I put another block C there, it's still balanced. Right? So if you do something to one side of the equation, you have to do it to the other side. Right? So it's like what you add to one side of the equation, you add to the other side. Right? Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other side. That way you don't change the balance. Right? By the same token, the subtraction property of equality. What you take away from one side, you have to take away from the other side as well. It kind of goes hand in hand with the addition property. Right, so this says that if A equals B, then if you take away something from both sides, and in this case order matters, right? It's still balanced. All right, and then the last two properties, again, this all has to do with whatever you do to one side of the equal sign, you've got to do to the other side of the equal sign. So the last two properties we're going to talk about are the multiplication and division properties. And then we're going to start to use them in the next section. Okay, so I have the multiplication property of equality. In this case, if I have two quantities that are equal, if A equals B, and then I multiply them by the same number C on both sides, I don't change it either. The equality still exists. Right? So if A equals B to start off with, then A times C equals B times C. And by the same token, the division property of equality. If I start off with A equals B, then if I divide both sides by the number C, the equality still remains. This has a special condition though, but as long as C doesn't equal 0, right? Because we can't have 0 in the denominator. Okay, so those are the four basic properties of equality: the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And we're going to use those to solve equations in the next section.